job. I hope I can be as strong as she was. I'd like to read something to you that a good friend of ours, Sean Smith, put together for David, and actually for all of us. It was a cold Monday when I found out about you. A sinking feeling gripped my body as I heard the news. I wish I could have been there to help you if I only knew. You can never come back from what you decided to do. I wondered if you ever knew how much you meant to me. I wondered what you thought that day. I wished I could have seen. What was so bad? I can't imagine what it would be. I asked these questions to God and cried myself to sleep. We've always had such great times, you, me, and others. You left so much behind, your grands, wives, sisters, and brothers. So many unanswered questions, and now we all suffer. You are one of a kind, and there'll never be another. One of these days, surely we'll meet again, when our time here on earth has come to an end. So please, God, help our healing to begin as we say goodbye, brother, husband, and friend.
Well, I'd like to take things in a little bit different direction. I was the oldest of the three brothers, and I remember, especially David, when he was born. Obviously, I was not there, but I can remember waiting for news. I had one little brother, Steve, and apparently when I found out he was coming, I hid all my toys up in a tree. But when I was waiting at the house for news of what I was going to get, we didn't know back in those days till it popped out. But I can remember my grandmother on the phone and saying, just shaking her head, "You've got another brother." But that was music to my ears, even though I knew I'd have to share more of my toys. I don't think David found his balance until he was 8th, 9th grade. When he rode his tricycle, he wouldn't pedal it with the wheel straight. He turned it sideways and scooted it. I don't know if that was his way of maintaining control, but every toy David ever had, it wasn't hard to see who owned it because the tire was worn flat across. Big wheels, tricycles, whatever. I can remember our dad taking us all to the bicycle store down in Midtown and bought me a new bike. Steve picked out a new bike. David picked out a tricycle that was about this big. And I think he was, you remember, Steve, how old David was then? 4 or 5. He was older than that. But Steve, we got our bicycles down, we're riding off. Daddy reaches over and pulls the big tricycle out of the back of the station wagon. David crawls up on it and promptly turns over. Steve and I helped him up after a couple of hours, but we stopped laughing at him after that. But, he was always the clown of the family. He was always happy and a lot of fun to be around all throughout things, even though, thanks to David, I did have my one experience in life of wearing handcuffs. It was all a misunderstanding. David had graduated high school, and it just so happened that I had a customer that needed something delivered to the airport space, and there Steve and I jumped in my Toyota truck and headed to Myrtle Beach to meet up with David. We went to a hotel room, a bunch of his friends, and apparently that wasn't their room. Steve and I didn't know that. And so the next thing we know, somebody's knocking on the door, and I'll fast forward a little bit. There was some guy coming through the crowd behind David with a stick, and I'm like, that's not going to work. I didn't know he was a cop. But, next thing I know, David and I had the drug experience of riding in a police car. Of course, it was all a big misunderstanding when we got there. They cleared it all up. But I think David figured out at that point that I had his back, and I wish he hadn't forgotten that Monday. But, you know, we'll never have all the answers as to what was going on with him. No doubt David never would have seen this coming. David loved life and loved his family, and for what it was just that one split second. He had two decisions to make, and he made the wrong one. But that doesn't mean there was anything to be ashamed of. He just made a mistake, and I'm sure that if he had it to do over again, he would have loved to have a second chance. But it's just unfortunate it went that way, and not a lot of folks out here. I mean, a lot of guys have trouble talking about things that are bothering them. You need to get over that, you know, and pay attention when your loved ones are having problems. But I love David, always will, and I'll remember him for who he was. A very happy, loved individual. And I thank you all for coming.
Appreciate so much those words from two of David's brothers. And of course, we're here today to honor the life of David, and as best as we know how, to try to bring a measure of comfort to the families. And to the family, we do express our deep and sincere sympathy, and I'm sure everyone, as well as I, want you to know that you are in our continued thoughts and prayers. David Smith Register, 49 of Kingston, passed away Monday, February 4th, 2013. He was preceded in death by his mother, Betty Smith Blackburn. Survivors include his loving wife of 24 years, Melanie Collins Register, his father and stepmother, Buddy and Jenny Register of Florida, sister Patty Hicks of Florida, brothers Randy Register of Kingston and Stephen Travis Register of Florida. Nieces and nephews include Ryan Register of Oak Ridge, Stephanie Register of Kingston, Alex and Savannah Register, Jeannie and Mandy Hicks, all of Florida. David was for many years employed as a quality control radiography technician in the production of aircraft engines with Pratt & Whitney in Florida, and then in the same capacity with Standard Aero in Maryville, Tennessee, in the rebuilding of aircraft engines. At the time of his death, he had been employed at the Y-12 plant in Oak Ridge as a radiographer, QC technician since 2011. He was born in North Carolina and grew up there and in Kingston, graduating from Roane County High School in 1982. He loved his farm and his animals, especially his dog, Cletus. David and Melanie enjoyed boating, camping, and four-wheeling with their many friends and schoolmates, and he will long be remembered and missed by his family and a multitude of friends from work and the community that he loved. David was a Christian who attended the Lawnville Road Church of Christ in Kingston with his wife Melanie and other family members. Let us pray. Holy and righteous Father in heaven, we thank you so much for the life of David and the example that he's given us. An example of a life of kindness, love, patience, forbearance, and gentleness. And Father, as this dear family is grieving in his death, I pray that you will bless them, that you will comfort them, strengthen them, and give them that peace, Father, that passes understanding. We know that death is not easy to deal with, Father, and we don't always understand your will. And so we ask for strength at this time in dealing with that will. Please grant to us and the family the strength to do that, and help the family to have an undying faith in you and your word, remembering the promise that you will not place upon us that which we cannot bear. Help them to ever keep in their mind the happy memories of David and to follow the example that he has set while he was on the earth. And help us, Father, to be a constant source of strength and comfort for this family and to ever strive to glorify you. In Jesus' precious name I pray. Amen. The writer of the book of Hebrews in chapter 4 and verse 16 says, "Let us therefore come boldly to the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need." And so it is that I hope you will, as individuals and as a family, do this evening. To come boldly to God's throne of grace in order that He could shower you with grace and mercy. As you deal with your grief, your heartache, your loneliness, and the many other emotions associated with occasions like this, that comfort and peace can only be found through God and His holy word. Our purpose in gathering together this evening is, of course, not to determine the final destiny of David. Nothing that we could say could add anything to his accomplishments, and nothing we could say could cause any amount of condemnation or reward. And so this evening, realize that all of that has already been determined by a God who is just, a God who is merciful, and a God who is fair. But as we do gather this evening, I'm reminded of the account of the rich man and Lazarus in Luke chapter 16. And you may recall in that chapter that Luke records for us a story about two men, the rich man and Lazarus. And you may recall that both of these men had died. One of them woke up in Abraham's bosom, the place that we may call paradise. The other of those individuals, that rich man, woke up and he found himself in torment. And that rich man who woke up in torment was extremely desperate for Lazarus to come to where he was at, to dip the tip of his finger in water and to cool his tongue. And not only that, but that rich man begged for the opportunity for he or for someone else to go back and to please talk to his family, to his friends, to get them to understand what they needed to do so they wouldn't come where he was at. And so I thought about that this evening and wanted to use that as a backdrop and to think about if David could speak to you again, what would he say to you tonight? I suggest, first of all, that David would say to you, stay close to your family and your friends. He lived this philosophy out in his life. I recall in the past few days getting to know more about David. The story was told of me that shows just how much he cared for his family. And the story was that the younger sister, Patty, apparently was a picky eater, and she would decide that she wasn't going to eat what was given to her. And so David, her brother, would take that fork or spoon and load it up with food and make the airplane noises, like parents do. Or say something like, open up so the dump truck can dump the dirt in. And that just shows how much he cared. That's just one instance. As he grew older and he found the love of his life, he exhibited extreme patience in his life. And Melanie's not shy about this. As a matter of fact, she wanted me to be sure that I told you how patient and how loving he was. A man that always loved her, who always did what was best for her. And that's how he will be remembered. He was close to his own family, but he also considered his mother and father-in-law to be his second mother and father. They were more than just his in-laws. And that was a reciprocal feeling with them. They thought more of him than just a son-in-law, that it was their son. They were happy to have him as a son-in-law. Concerning his friends, David was a man who believed that close friendships were important. That's evident in the things that he and Melanie did together with him, like the boating and the camping, the four-wheeling, and even riding motorcycles together. You know, we all have those special people in our lives who touch us in a special way. And David had particularly two such friends. Two friends that he counted as dear and as close as his own brothers. And those were Sean Smith and Chad Bales. And these were men who were always ready and willing to help David, I understand, in any way that they could. And I know that David was the same kind of friend for them. In the workplace, David was also thought very highly of, given jobs that required high intellect and integrity. And he had come to think of his co-workers at Standard Aero as family, and he deeply enjoyed working with them. And so he would tell us this evening to keep your friends and family close. If David could speak to you again, he would also tell you, I believe, that character is important in life. Character is defined as the set of qualities that make somebody or something distinctive, especially somebody's qualities of mind and feeling. And if you knew David, you knew that he was a man who was mindful of his character. He was mindful of the impression that he would leave with others. An old American proverb states, if you take care of your character, your reputation will take care of itself. And I think that was the case with David. Because he was a man of high integrity, loyalty, honesty, and trust. A man who always sought the best in people, who was not a confrontational individual, who didn't gossip about others, and a man who showed his love for people, especially his wife Melanie. And he made it a point in his life to maintain that character. And I would say very few, if any, could mark something against his character. Even as a child, I believe the siblings recall how David was always an honest child. And that's rare these days. And you say, well, why are you pointing all of this out? And the answer is because your character has something to do with your eternal destiny. That's why Peter tells us in 1 Peter chapter 1 and verse 16 to be holy. And I do believe that David tried to do that in his life. He understood to have a high moral character doesn't mean that life has to be boring. And I'm sure the family could share with you stories that would make you cry because of laughter. As his brother mentioned, David was the clown of the family, the one that always tried to bring cheer to someone else, the one to tell a joke. And I want to tell one that you might find interesting this evening. As a younger individual, David took karate lessons. And he would come home, and of course, I guess karate is one of those things you have to practice to get good at. Having his brothers that he could have practiced on, he didn't do that. He practiced on poor Patty. I asked her why that was the case, and she really didn't have a good answer. Of course, he didn't try to harm her. It was all in good fun. But you know, he and Melanie had a plan together. They started their life together in Okeechobee, Florida. That's where they lived. That's where Melanie had her first job. Later, they moved back to this area, and they loved it. But they also loved Okeechobee, and that's where they planned to retire. We'll continue with these thoughts in just a few moments. But at this time, the family has requested that we sing a few verses of Amazing Grace. So if you have that sheet with you, we're going to sing the first, second, third, and the sixth verses of that song.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious is that grace appeared, the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace hath brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we know less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun.
Those two things that I believe David would tell you this evening are crucial and important. But there are some other things that I believe David would want me to share with you tonight that are of far more importance than anything we have said thus far. So these are some spiritual truths that David would want you to know. And the first of those is that God exists. God exists. You know, it really is foolish to believe that there is no God. The Apostle Paul reminds us in Romans chapter 1 and verse 20 that since the creation of the world, His invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even His eternal power and Godhead. That tells us that if you just stop and look around the things that have been created for us, you can tell that there's a God.